Hi, I'm Mia.
And I'm Kieran.
We're at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. to learn more about our heritage as Asian Pacific Americans,
as well as the many contributions that Asian Pacific Americans have made to our culture.
Let's start our visit at the Smithsonian Castle.
Great idea. The Smithsonian has been called America's Attic, but I think it's really America's treasures. It collects objects and artworks from all our different cultures, as well as historical artifacts, scientific specimens, and technological innovations made by all Americans from all walks of life.
It's easy to spot Asian inventions. Fireworks, paper, even paper money, all invented in Asia.
And the Chinese invented movable type hundreds of years before Gutenberg.
Look, fancy china designed by architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Did you know he studied in Japan?
Just the word China. Guess why it's called that?
Over here, Christy Yamaguchi's skates. She was one of many Asian Americans to win an Olympic gold medal.
I've always loved to watch her skate. The Smithsonian has a lot to say about the triumphs of Asian Pacific Americans. What about our struggles?
Yeah, like the fact that Christy's mother was born during World War II in an American prison camp for people of Japanese descent, most of whom were U.S. citizens.
We've overcome a lot of obstacles in our long history on this continent.
Hi, I'm Franklin Odo, Director of the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Program and a curator at the National Museum of American History. Welcome to the Smithsonian.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
While the Smithsonian doesn't have a museum specifically focused on Asian Pacific Americans, I can tell you that almost every museum has something really important to say about our experiences. The 19 different museums and research centers of the Smithsonian, plus the National Zoo, have hundreds of photos, documents, and artifacts related to Asian Pacific Americans on display. And the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Program creates exhibitions about APAs. Our office also offers public programs throughout the year. We do things like lectures, book readings and signings, film screenings, and conferences.
That's incredible. So where should we start?
Well, how about starting at the National Museum of the American Indian?
The Pacific was navigated for thousands of years by Pacific Islanders, including Native Hawaiians, using canoes just like this one, only much larger. They had to be large enough for living space and to carry food and livestock too. Those were long journeys they had to be prepared for.
The Pacific is huge. How could people find their way across in something like this?
They used stars for guidance and built maps using sticks and shells to symbolize islands, waves, and currents. Amazingly, the same navigation techniques still work today.
That means that the very first APAs came to North America thousands of years before the Europeans.
Wow. And much later, after the United States was founded and the country grew, European Americans brought more Asians here to do heavy labor.
The Smithsonian has historical artifacts that tell that story, but we have to go to a different museum to see them.
American history?
Right, let's go.
We learned in grade school that the Transcontinental Railroad was built in large part by thousands of workers brought over from China.
But when this photograph was taken at the joining of the east and west sections, all the Chinese workers were sent away so they wouldn't appear in the photo.
Discrimination?
You bet.
About this time, California began to be a center of agriculture.
Asians, including Chinese, Japanese, and Filipinos, provided cheap labor for a rapidly growing industry, raising vegetables and fruits. Hey, did you know that a Korean-American farmer invented the nectarine? And Ah Bing, a Chinese-American, developed the Bing cherry.
And out in Hawaii, sugarcane production was primarily done by Asian immigrants. The Smithsonian has a collection of knives that Asian workers used to cut the cane.
That's back-breaking work. I can understand why they would need so many workers to do that job.
But there were a lot of barriers to immigration, not just in California, but across the country.
Let's find out more about that story.
Hi, I'm Noriko. I was part of the team that created this exhibit. While the United States is proud to be a nation of immigrants, our country erected lots of racist barriers, specifically against Asians.
Yeah, look at this sculpture. Here are all the other ethnic groups inside the eagle's nest, but the Chinese worker doesn't look like he's going to make it.
Unfortunately, this sculpture was all too accurate. Congress passed a series of laws, making it almost impossible for Asians to enter the country, starting with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882.
What if someone wanted to come anyway?
Some lucky Asians were able to immigrate, even after the laws were passed. Having money and connections helped. Others came as picture brides, women who married men who lived in the United States that they only knew from exchanging photos. And after 1910, San Francisco's Angel Island became a detention center for would-be immigrants. One way they could avoid deportation was to convince an officer that they were sons or daughters of U.S. citizens. Officers would ask endless questions about their parents and families to try to see if they were really related to someone in the U.S.
Is that where the paper sons came in?
Right. Many were legitimate sons and daughters of a U.S. citizen, but others just pretended to be.
Look, here's a coaching book. The label says that immigrants would buy these books and study them for months to prepare for their interviews.
That's a remarkable story. But let's back up a little. Does this case include anything about the Japanese American prison camps during World War II?
No, this exhibit is about immigration. The exhibit Price of Freedom goes into this, one of the less shining moments of American history. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, a surge of anti-Japanese hysteria took place in the country. Many loyal Americans of Japanese descent were forced to move from their homes and farms. Eventually, 120,000 people were locked up for years in barbed wire prisons in isolated places like this one in Heart Mountain, Wyoming. Ironically, a segregated group of Japanese American soldiers became the most decorated unit in U.S. history.
That's so unfair. I saw a painting about this. Roger Shimomura's diary, December 12, 1941.
It's in the Smithsonian American Art Museum.
Thank goodness after the war, immigration barriers finally began to tumble, and Asian Pacific American cultures became much more accepted as part of daily life. What artifacts are here at the museum that show the experiences of Asian Americans?
Oh, there are so many, both on display and behind the scenes.
Let's go see some.
So the Smithsonian collects artifacts from everyday life. We call that material culture, like these yo-yos.
Wow, I love yo-yos. Can I try one of these?
Not without special permission. These are part of our study collection, and some of them are worth thousands of dollars.
What's the Asian connection?
Well, the yo-yo was supposed to have originated in China. The oldest yo-yos in our collection were manufactured in a plant started by a man named Pedro Flores, a Filipino-American. He's been credited with starting the yo-yo rage in America.
What about other games?
Asian games, you mean? There's the game of Go, and there's chess, dominoes, mahjong, chutes and ladders even.
Those are so old school. What about manga or Japanese comics and anime and Astro Boy and Hello Kitty, Pokemon, Dragon Ball, PlayStation, Wii?
Slow down, one thing at a time. Does the Smithsonian collect manga?
Well, not here at the National Museum of American History, at least not yet. But we can go to the Freer Gallery, which has a nice collection of woodcuts, which are supposed to be the precursors of today's anime and manga.
Great, let's go.
Okay.
I read that the roots of manga go way back. Some say even as far as 12th century Japan.
Didn't the great Japanese artist Hokusai create a series of prints he called manga? Can we go see them?
Well, throughout the Sackler and Freer galleries, you will find very important examples of art from all over Asia. But for now, let me take you behind the scenes so we can see some of Hokusai's more fragile pieces.
Wow. We're so lucky to be able to see these.
Hokusai was a master of the Japanese woodblock prints, or ukiyo-e. And what you see before you are two real volumes from his manga or sketches, the first of which was published in 1814.
These are almost like a catalog of all the different ways you can tell a story or show an emotion.
Yes, and for comparison or contrast, you might check out contemporary Asian Pacific American artists, some of whom are represented in other Smithsonian museums.
I really wanted to visit the Smithsonian American Art Museum.
To visit the electronic superhighway?
Right, let's go.
Nam June-paik was born in Korea in 1930 and lived and worked in New York City. He's known as the father of video art.
I like the way that this sculpture represents a cross-section of America, Peck's adopted home.
I like how this shows that we're all part of the American family.
We've seen a lot today, but I think we've really only scratched the surface.
That's for sure. We hope you'll take every opportunity to visit the Smithsonian
To see for yourself how Asian Pacific Americans have lived and worked.
and how we've become deeply integrated into the life and culture of the United States. Bye!
Bye.